Good morning, everybody. Wednesday morning, One True Sport Daily. I am your host once again today, Ryan Droste of the Top Rope Nation podcast. Guest hosting one more time for my friend Zack Heydorn, the usual host of this show. Zack will be back right here tomorrow morning, so make sure you tune in for Zack's return. But this is my fourth show I've done in a row here at One True Sport. It's been a lot of fun. Been great interacting with all of you. Hopefully we can do it again sometime. Check out my podcast. You see it down there in the corner, Top Rope Nation, for more from me in the future. And while you're here, of course, subscribe to the One True Sport YouTube channel. Like this video, comment, leave a chat message. Let me know your thoughts on everything going on in the world of pro wrestling today, Wednesday, June 26, 2024. You know, I got to say, when we wrapped the show yesterday, I was like, content might be a little bit thin tomorrow. I guess we'll preview AEW Dynamite, maybe be some talking points, cover NXT a little bit. There's definitely a lot to talk about. So we got a full show here on deck. I'm glad you could join us, and I look forward to chatting with all of you here in the chat. As I said, you can support us here at One True Sport by subscribing to the channel. You can become a member of One True Sport. Go to onetruesport.com. All kinds of great benefits that you can read about over there. We just had a exclusive members only question and answer session with Dustin Rhodes the other night. And as all of you probably know, One True Sport is putting out content all the time with some of the biggest legends in pro wrestling history. People like Arn Anderson and Kurt Angle and Rob Van Dam and the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase, Magnum TA. The list goes on and on. So subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of that great content coming up here in the future. And by becoming a member, you get even more content. And while you're at it, subscribe to the Top Rope Nation YouTube channel as well for more from me and my co-host, Justin Joint and Jesse Velasquez over on the Top Rope Nation YouTube channel. So, yeah, I see the chats already coming in. Eddie saying, rest in peace, Sika. Yes, indeed. Got some sad news yesterday. That was going to be my leading topic. I mean, I think it has to be. Sika Anoa'i is one of the big legends in the world of pro wrestling for many, many different reasons. Of course, he was one half of the Wild Samoans, a WWE Hall of Fame tag team. The Wild Samoans were three-time WWF tag team champions back in 1980, 1983. They were kind of mainstays on television in the early days of WWF's expansion. They're one of those teams that transcended into pop culture. Many people were familiar with the Wild Samoans who were only casual wrestling fans back in the early to mid 1980s. And of course, Sika was a big part of that, being half of the WWF Tag Team Champions on three separate occasions. Inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame back in 2007, a very deserving induction. And of course, most notably in today's world, the father of two professional wrestlers. That would be Matt Anoa'i, who went on to become Rosie back in the early to mid 2000s on WWE television. Matt sadly passed away back in 2017. And also the father of Joe Anoa'i, better known as Roman Reigns, biggest star of the WWE today. So thoughts out to the Anoa'i family on this loss. I believe Sika was in his late 70s, lived a full life. But still, you know, we would have hoped he could have had a few more years out there. I know he had been having some health issues in recent years. So it's really sad to read about his passing. And of course, he also impacted the future of wrestling, not just with his family and his extended family and the Anoa'i family, but for many years after his retirement from the ring, he was participating and running, you know, the Wild Samoan Training Center down there in Florida and helping train the future of professional wrestling. So a guy who is really, really important to this industry's history and future, and certainly will be missed. Eddie chiming in the chat. Afa and Sika scared the hell out of me when I was a young wrestling fan. I mean, me too. I was born in the early to mid 80s, and I mean, I remember even seeing them as a small kid, and then certainly on the Coliseum videos when I was a kid, and they were quite the personalities, big personalities to be sure. And yeah, a great tag team. This guy's gene pool will definitely influence the future of professional wrestling for many, many years to come. So thoughts out to the family of Sika Anoa'i. Last night they did air a tribute Tasika as part of NXT in their broadcast on Tuesday night. Thought we could go through the NXT results here real quick. If you did see NXT last night, give me your thoughts on the show here in the chat. You can support the stream and the channel with a super chat while you're at it if you'd like. If not, I'll try to get as many chat messages up during the show as I can. But I'll just read my notes here on NXT last night and everything that went down as they continue to build towards Heat Wave, which is their next PLE, which will happen on July 7th, the day after the WWE Money in the Bank PLE here, just in, a week and a half. So we had Chase U winning the Tag Team Turmoil match last night on NXT. They eliminated the New Catch Republic to win the Tag Team Turmoil match. So they earned an NXT Tag Team title opportunity against Nathan Frazier and Axiom at Heat Wave. So they built to that. We saw Wes Lee defeat Joe Coffey in a very, very brief match, actually much quicker than you would expect. And then Lee had a face-off with the NXT champion Obafemi afterwards in building to their match at Heat Wave for the NXT North American title. We had Tony D'Angelo defeating Nate Frazier in round 6, 2-1 to retain the Heritage Cup last night. And what was the best match on the show? A very good match between D'Angelo and Nate Frazier last night. Check that one out if you're into NXT. Had NXT Women's Champion Roxanne Perez defeat Carmen Petrovic. This match was really, really brief. Surprised me because Petrovic had built up a little bit of momentum in recent weeks. So it was kind of surprising to me, despite being in there with the champ, that they would beat her so quickly. Not sure that this is really the best use of the champion to just squash somebody who has been building up a little bit of momentum elsewhere on the roster. That's what they did. I just wouldn't have put Petrovic in there with the champion at this point in time. They had Lola Vice out there on guest commentary. And after the match, she took out Roxanne Perez. She posed with Roxanne's NXT Women's Championship belt, and she left with the title. We also saw Tavian Heights defeat Damon Kemp. Another squash match. Nothing really to talk about there. Sol Ruka defeated Ariana Grace to become the #1 contender for the NXT Women's North American title. This match was not good. Ruka, still very early in her career, pretty sloppy throughout this match. Afterwards, after getting the victory, she faced off with Kalani Jordan to build to their match for the NXT Women's North American title at Heat Wave here in a week and a half. And then in the main event, Trick Williams and Sean Spears had a back and forth match. They've both been talking about getting an opportunity at the NXT Championship, and Brooks Jensen ends up coming out, storming the ring. He hit the NXT champion with the announce table cover. He set up a C4 by Spears to get the win. And then afterwards, Ava announced that all 4 men would face off in a fatal 4-way match at Heat Wave for the NXT Championship. So that's essentially what happened on WWE NXT last night. I think I got it all. Yeah, so that will be the fatal 4-way at Heat Wave. Trick Williams defending against Ethan Page, Sean Spears, and Javion Evans for the NXT Championship. Don't see anyone commenting in the chat, so maybe you guys didn't check out NXT last night, but that's what happened on NXT last night. There's your brief results from Tuesday night's show. Let's flip it over to AEW. What does AEW have going on? Dynamite tonight, of course, 8 o'clock Eastern time, 7 o'clock Central on TBS. This card has kind of trickled out over the last week, even like the last day. They have added finally Daniel Garcia to the show. I believe that announcement was made yesterday. I mean, they're in Buffalo, New York, so it makes a lot of sense to get Daniel Garcia on the card. You would have liked to have seen him announced for a match maybe a little bit earlier to help move tickets a little bit. We can check ticket sales here in a little bit. I'll pull up WrestleTix and see what they're at for tonight. But I think the big theme tonight is they're kind of pulling out the old WWE trope, and something the WWE still does. And it's the whole thing where, can they coexist? You got these people who are going to be wrestling each other at Forbidden Door this Sunday night, and they're forced to team with one another. right? So in what I assume will be the main event, AEW World Champion Swerve Strickland will team with his opponent, Will Ospreay, to take on the Gates of Agony. I mean, this is the kind of thing that I'm definitely back in the late 90s, early 2000s. As I said, you still see it today, but I mean, this is what WWE would always pull out on their go home shows, the can they coexist thing. And that's going to be the main event match, but that's not the only can they coexist match, because you have a trios match where we're going to see Saraya, Anna Jay, and Harley Cameron team to face AEW Women's Champion Toni Storm, Mariah May, and Mina Shirakawa. And of course, you know, you got Storm and Mina there who are wrestling for the AEW Women's title, with Mariah May there in the middle and all the turmoil going on there. Well, they were forced to team tonight for this women's trios match. So again, can they coexist? That's the storyline of tonight's AEW Dynamite. Elsewhere on the show, they've got MJF announced for the show. Now, last week, MJF opened the show in what I thought was a very good match against Roosh. Now, of course, there's been a lot written about the rating last week for AEW, and I see it's it's already being mentioned by Eddie here in the chat. They had 500,000 viewers last week. There's a lot of things happening last week. I don't know a lot to really pull down their rating, but it was very surprising because it was a huge drop off from the week before. And I've said this on One True Sport Daily a number of times. I really think that AEW television has been very good lately. I think the storytelling, especially going into Swerve and Ospreay, has been really good. Certainly the ratings are not supporting that. But I think this kind of thing is a slow build. I think that you got to keep at it. You can't go by the weekly ratings. You got to look long-term and try to build for the future. They got to try to build up to where they were back in 2021 in the ratings. And it's going to be tough with WWE being so hot right now. I think it's pretty difficult to have two hot wrestling promotions. And so AEW definitely has their work cut out for them. But I do think the storytelling on the shows has been better recently than maybe it was 6 months ago or so. Carl checking in the chat. Carl is a dedicated Top Rope Nation listener. Thanks for checking in, Carl. Carl says it's a pretty stacked card for weekly TV. Regardless of getting tickets moved, they seem consistently to get a 20 to 25 uptick in tickets during the last 7 to 10 days before the show, regardless of booking. And he's talking 20 to 25%. Yeah, I mean, they do usually close pretty strong for these Dynamites. I know I was just at one a couple of weeks ago, and the ticket sales closed pretty strong for Des Moines. So, yeah, I mean, they announced the hometown guy, Daniel Garcia. They announced some of these matches at the last minute, and hopefully tickets are moving for him. I'll check the stats here in just a second. But, yeah, I mean, what got me talking about this was the Roosh MJF match. And while MJF is one of their big stars, of course, I don't know that was the greatest way to start the show last week. It was a pretty long match. It was a very good match, but I don't know that draws in the casuals, because most people tuning in are going to recognize certainly Roosh. Maybe they would know MJF a little bit. I know AEW was of the belief that their ratings was hurt based on their lead-in last week, because they didn't have the typical Big Bang Theory lead-in, and they felt that hurt their rating. And there's probably some truth to that. So it'll be interesting to see how the rating responds this week, and hopefully they do a lot better than last week. Elsewhere on the card, Owen Hart Cup Tournament, Jay White will be wrestling Ray Phoenix. Mentioned MJF is on the show. We don't know what he's going to be doing yet. Daniel Garcia, not announced for a match. The hometown guy just says we'll hear from him. Mercedes Moné is also announced for the show. Again, it just says we'll be hearing from her on the show. No match. The one I'm most looking forward to tonight, and they just announced this yesterday, Kyle O'Reilly taking on Zack Sabre Jr. And, Kyle O'Reilly, he's returned. He's lost a lot of big matches, but he's had some awesome matches since returning. I'm kind of just waiting for him to turn heel and to, be the crazy Kyle O'Reilly, and that will really draw me in. But for right now, maybe he'll lose this match and he'll go nuts. Who knows? But eventually, when Kyle O'Reilly brings on that heel persona, I think it will be much better. I think they're slowly building up to that. But I mean, certainly this match, as far as a technical match goes, O'Reilly and Sabre tonight, it's going to be an awesome, awesome match. I'm really looking forward to that. And then the only other match announced for Dynamite tonight is another trios match. So we got the Blackpool Combat Club, Moxley, Claudio, and Wheeler Yuta taking on Shingo Takagi, Titan, and Hiromu Takahashi. That, again, maybe not people that the general audience are going to be that familiar with, but my God, that's going to be a great match too. And of course, Shingo is wrestling Bryan Danielson at Forbidden Door. Danielson will be on guest commentary for this match, saving his body for what I am sure is going to be a hell of a match. I'm sure these guys are going to go 30 minutes plus at Forbidden Door on Sunday. I mentioned this on the show the other day. If you have never seen Bryan Danielson and Shingo Takagi from Dragon Gate back in 2010, look it up. Phenomenal match. You can find it on YouTube and Daily Motion. It's awesome stuff. So if you were not already looking forward to Shingo and Bryan, watch that match, and I guarantee you will. What are we seeing in the chat here? If Roosh had been pushed like he was in ROH, people would know how good he is. Agree? Definitely truth to that, Eddie. Eddie says, I liked Kyle O'Reilly's feud with Adam Cole in NXT. Yeah, certainly. One of the highlights in the history of NXT, for sure, I would say. I'm going to look up the ticket sales for tonight, so bear with me. Credit goes out to WrestleTix, which is one of my favorite follows on Patreon, other than the Top Rope Nation podcast, of course. I know they posted a update this morning, I believe, if I can find it here. Yeah, morning update. Buffalo, New York, AEW Dynamite, 53 minutes ago. They have they're at the KeyBank Center tonight for Dynamite. And they got the show set up for 4,500 fans. And they're 3,800 tickets sold. So there's only 664 tickets available for tonight per WrestleTix. You hope they do some walk-up business for sure. I think with AEW's ticket sales, maybe I'll rant on this for a second as we get to the close of today's show. I think one of their problems in selling tickets, and I talked about this on Top Rope Nation back before I attended Dynamite 2 weeks ago. I think one of the issues is that their tickets are just priced too highly, especially given the size of a lot of the buildings they're running. When I went to Dynamite in Des Moines 2 weeks ago, they ran like a 16,000 seat arena. And it's just way too big of a building for what they're doing right now. So, of course, the upper deck was all tarped off and they only sold the lower deck. And to me, the problem with their tickets right now is the price point. Because if you want to get on the floor, you're paying like over $100 per ticket. And then on that lower level, which is the only section that they're selling these tickets for like $90, I think $70. I believe $70 was like the cheapest ticket at the Dynamite I went to. And I think in the last couple of days, they dropped those tickets down to like $40. So, I mean, they got the higher priced tickets because they're trying to capitalize gate-wise on the smaller audience. But I think they're kneecapping themselves by pricing so highly because I feel that you can't get people who are just a little bit curious on what AEW is to buy a $70 ticket. I mean, look, if you're a dad and you got a couple of kids or you're bringing your wife with you, you're talking about $200 just to get in the door. I feel that AEW needs to be selling, $25 tickets. The worst ticket should be $25. You fill up those arenas much easier, I think. Now, yeah, WWE, they price their lower level tickets around the same, maybe even a little bit more. But WWE also has cheaper tickets way at the top of the venue. And the problem for AEW is they're not selling those tickets. So like they're just charging the high dollar on the lower bowl and they're not even selling tickets in the upper deck because they're not drawing big enough crowds. So that, yeah, WWE, they can sell the big money tickets. They're a hot promotion right now, but they are still offering pretty cheap tickets just to get in the door. And AEW is not doing that. So I think they're pricing themselves out of the market on people who might be just a little bit curious. Certainly WWE, they can do some walk-up business because they're a brand that's been around decades and they have that marketplace awareness. But AEW just doesn't have that yet. The promotion's only 5 years old. So if people are just hearing about it for the first time, if they look up tickets, they're going to be like, this is way too much money just to get into the door. I don't even know what this is. Maybe I know Bryan Danielson or Moxley or Mercedes, but am I really going to pay $200 to take my kids to something that I haven't watched that much? I think that's the problem. Carl, who was over there in the UK checking, he says the prices for the show in Cardiff are insanely high for a TV taping. Yeah, and AEW uses this kind of like surge pricing model that WWE uses it too. All the concerts and sports teams, they use it, where ticket prices start off really high on some of the seats, which they call like the platinum seats, and then those taper off when demand goes down. I don't know if AEW should be using that right now, though. Eddie checking in. They need to have regular events at smaller venues. I agree. Kind of like here in the US, kind of like the mid-major basketball arena size. That is what that would be if you look at college basketball stadiums. And they do run some of those. And I think those are the perfect size. I talked about on Top Rope Nation. They ran where I'm from here in Iowa. And Des Moines, that arena is really big. I mean, it could be a major league arena. There's another arena in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, that seats about 6,000 to 7,000 people. And Cedar Rapids has had many big wrestling shows over the years. There's a WCW pay-per-view in that building. I felt they should have run that arena. I think it's the perfect size for them, and it would look much more full on TV. And they are still, they're still booking these huge buildings here and there. I know they got a big one for Blood and Guts in Nashville here in several weeks. They're running, of course, Long Island for Forbidden Door. Ticket sales for that one are pretty good because they always do well for the pay-per-views. AEW has a dedicated fan base, and people travel in for their pay-per-views. The last update for Forbidden Door, which was last night, they've got the building set up for 10,200 fans, and they distributed 9,000. So there's just over 1,000 tickets left. So hopefully they close strong and they sell out that building for the setup they have right now. And that's a good gate for AEW to get 10,000 in the building for a pay-per-view. I think that's a good gate. And we also have to remember for AEW that this is a promotion that is 5 years old. We can't talk about them really in the same breath as WWE. Like WWE, as I said, is a company that has decades of cultural relevancy. AEW is still trying to carve out an audience. And in what they have done in 5 years, the big crowds at All In the UK, the pay-per-view gates, the pay-per-view numbers over here, which blow away the final years of WCW, which was a promotion that had been around for a long time. I mean, they blow away those WCW pay-per-view numbers in the closing years, 2000 in WCW. They blow away those numbers. So we got to keep in mind where they're at 5 years in, I think is really good. They just got to keep being patient and building this thing the right way. I know for a fact that the television executives at Warner Brothers are very pleased. Even last week, they had that bad number for Dynamite. I believe they were still third on cable for the night. So we have to keep all of this in perspective. It's a 5-year-old company that's touring the nation, touring the world. And with WWE being very hot, it's going to be tough. And WWE would not be as hot as they are right now without AEW. So don't get things confused here. If you lived through wrestling before AEW, 18 years when there was no real competition here in the US, things were dire. I mean, I was doing my wrestling show back in 2016 and 2017, and things got real rough. So AEW being out there certainly improved WWE, and it is a big piece of why their company is really hot right now. You cannot deny that. It forced them to up their game. It's the best thing for the wrestlers. It gives them leverage in their contracts. So anyone rooting for AEW to fail is a fool, because everyone in the wrestling business wants AEW to be a success so that they have more leverage to make more money. And that's what it's all about at the end of the day. And I think for 5 years in, AEW has been an overwhelming success, but there's definitely room for growth with all these things we talked about. Would like to see their ticket sales pick up a lot here in the future. Yeah, Andrew, no one wants to talk about Sold Out. Yeah, that was that pay-per-view in Cedar Rapids down the road for me. Let's see, Carl, some of these chats featured. The irony about the venues they are booking is that the Cardiff venue is one of the smaller they have booked outside of ROH and the Arlington shows. That's probably why the ticket prices are so high then. That makes sense. They're trying to capitalize. Also surprising, given they've moved over 40,000 tickets for All In, that they wouldn't run a bigger arena. When did we ever think they wouldn't sell a pay-per-view? Double or Nothing 2019 sold out in 4 minutes. I mean, WWE's pay-per-views don't sell out instantly. There's tickets available for SummerSlam. There's tickets available right now for Money in the Bank. I looked up a SmackDown here in a couple of weeks that's going to be in Omaha, which is not too far down the road for me. And there's lots of seats available for that one. So, I mean, WWE also closes really, really strong. I disagree, Eddie. I do not think that they would be this hot without competition. I think that, Paul, he's done well. I thought it started off shaky with him, though, in some of his booking when he first took over, that being Hunter Hearst Helmsley, Triple H. He was always good with NXT, though. He was working with a team of writers who were also very good down there at his side. But I think he had to grow into the role, and I think he has grown into the role. But I think that you are pushed to do better just naturally when you have competition. I mean, there's no way to prove that. Maybe you're right. But I think anytime there's competition, it just forces you to up your game. And they certainly have. WWE go back to like even when AEW first launched, if you go back and you look at some of the TV tapings in like 2019, AEW's first year, WWE ticket sales were rough. They were not selling. They look just like the Dynamite tapings right now. I see a lot of gloating by WWE stands on social media about, oh, look at this compared to AEW. It's like, do you not remember a few years ago? WWE was in the same boat, and they're a legacy brand that's been around for years. So, I mean, the business goes through these cycles. And right now, WWE is hot. And you would be hard pressed to find a time in history where both companies have been hot. 98, maybe, but by 99, WCW was going downhill. When WCW was ultra hot in 96 and 97, WWE was not doing great. 98 is probably the only year in the history of the business where two national brands were both really hot. I think, and wrestling was just so much in your face in pop culture during that era. I know people call right now a boom period for WWE, and that's because of the money they're making and their live touring and everything. But it is not close to the late 90s. I do not see wrestling shirts in public like I did in the late 90s. I just don't. So it's just a different ball game than it was back then. And I think it's just really hard. People don't have as much discretionary income right now as they did in the late 90s either to attend as many live events. So I think it'd be really, really hard for both companies to be hot right now. I mean, you're definitely right, Eddie. He had to clean up he who shall not be named's mess. Yeah. Yeah, Berlin, Carl chiming in for the Bash in Berlin show in late August for WWE. Berlin still has tickets available too. I agree on competition. I will stand by my view that TK, being as hands-on as he is across the board, is not going to have AEW at its optimum. I agree. He needs more help booking. I think TK cannot be running it pretty much on his own. I think he needs to bring in some other people. Yeah, Carl's right. Creatively in 97, both were hot, which led to both doing great business in 98. Yeah, 97 is where WWE's business started turning when it comes to like their live attendance. And you could see it churning for what happened in 98. We talked about this on Top Rope Nation recently. We went back and reviewed a show from May 97, a Raw is War show. And in 97, more often than not, Raw is War was the better show versus Nitro, but they were not winning the ratings war, but it was a slow build. If you go back now and you watch it, it's like, man, those Raws creatively were better. But the ratings did not reflect it. But the live gate started to reflect it for WWF, and their attendance started turning. Summer of 97, the Hart Foundation versus USA storyline is what that, along with Steve Austin and his involvement in that storyline, really started to change up the business trajectory of the WWE. I think that there's this narrative, and we just had the anniversary of it a few days ago, that when Austin gave the Austin 316 promo, that he just hit like a rocket and he was off, and that was in June of 96. And that is not the case at all, even for Steve Austin. He's talked about how he talked to the merchandise team about putting out the shirts right after that. But Steve Austin, 2 months later, was on the pre-show at SummerSlam 96, wrestling Yokozuna. So it wasn't really until Austin, despite the catchphrase being hot, started feuding with Brett, and then they had him feuding with the Hart Foundation. And then several months later, the company started to take off a little bit. And then you get Tyson in there in the build to WrestleMania 14, and then they're off to the races. So it was a long game. I mean, it was almost 2 years after Austin 316, almost 2 years before WWF won the ratings war after 83 weeks against Nitro. Andrew, yes, that is one of the all-time great Raws. Great callback. September of 97, the MSG Raw. It was the first time they had run TV at MSG in a long time. I mean, outside of the pay-per-views, which they had run, let's see, the prior year Survivor Series. But that was the show where Austin gave Vince the stunner for the first time. You know, he's still recovering from the neck injury at SummerSlam. Awesome show. Yep. Hunter and Cactus in the street fight. That was the debut of Cactus Jack in the WWF. Eddie checking in says TK needs to just sign the check, stay off TV, hire a booker that knows the business. I mean, I don't have a problem with him being involved in booking, but I don't think he should be the only person involved. I do think that the wrestlers should not, active wrestlers should not be involved in booking. There hasn't been many times in history where that has worked out too well. Yeah, he needs to bring in booking help for sure. And keep the talent in line. Certainly that's been an issue in the past. Let's see. Byron checking in. If WWE goes with my booking of Rhea Ripley's return on going through adversity, that's going to be great booking. We talked about this on the show yesterday. Go back on the channel if you want and watch yesterday's One True Sport Daily. They're just waiting to bring her back. I really hope Rhea gets back in time for SummerSlam. I mean, talk about a highlight of WWE TV over the last year. Big fan of Rhea Ripley. I had a chance to interview her several years ago when I was writing at comicbook.com, and one of my favorite interviews I've ever done. Just a genuinely really nice, passionate about wrestling. You could tell it really came through. One of the easiest interviews I've ever done. And I can't wait to see Rhea get back. I know that they're writing the women's division right now in a way that she can just step back in whenever she's ready. Certainly with this Liv Morgan storyline. And I would love to see Rhea Ripley get back in time for SummerSlam. That would be awesome. We'll see. We'll see. Guys, this has been a ton of fun today. Active chat room. Good to see some familiar faces, both of Top Rope Nation, like Carl here, and then people that have been chiming in here from One True Sport, like Andrew, over the last few days. You definitely make my job easier hosting this, single show here by myself when I can interact with you guys in the chat. It's been a lot of fun. Hopefully we'll be doing it again down the line. Zach, as I said, where he will be back tomorrow and hosting the show for the rest of the week. Zach's a good friend of mine, so make sure you tune in. Zach does a great job here on One True Sport Daily. And if he ever needs me to guest host again, I will. So I'll be in contact with the One True Sport team. I really, really appreciate you guys tuning in the last 4 shows that I have guest hosted. Again, if you enjoyed this discussion, please check out my podcast, Top Rope Nation. Subscribe to the YouTube channel or wherever podcasts are found. Would love to have you tune into that one as well. We got a Facebook group you can join. Search Top Rope Nation Pro Wrestling Discussion. My guy Carl is there talking pro wrestling almost every single day. A lot of good people over there as well. No problem, Andrew. This has been a lot of fun. He's got a great crew here. And I'm looking forward to watching the channel continue to grow, watching all the content from the legends. Really good stuff going on here at One True Sport Daily. All right, guys. So with that, I'm Ryan Droste. Appreciate your support. Subscribe to the channel while you're here. And we'll catch you again in the future. Enjoy AEW Dynamite tonight. And we'll see you all again real soon.